I want to cover the breaking news that took place a little after midnight last night. As I said, I was getting ready for bed, and my phone just lit up with people saying, cops killed. And, kind of like after October 1 happened, you had so much misinformation. Nobody really knew exactly what happened, except it was not good news and it was really bad. Well, it is bad. 2 separate shootings that happened in Las Vegas after midnight. Let me start with the first one that I don't necessarily have a problem with, at least the result. A man brandishing several guns, I believe, dressed in camouflage, dressed as G.I. Joe, was in front of the federal courthouse that was being guarded by police. And all courthouses, for the most part, throughout the country are being guarded by police, federal buildings. Metro police are saying that the man was brandishing several guns and reached for one of the guns, and the cop shot him and killed him. Don't know who this man was. Don't know if he was a protester. Don't know if he was with Black Lives Matter. And I'm not going to speculate on that. But I don't have a problem with what police did. And to be honest with you, if this guy was dressed like that, threatening police in camouflage and weapons, and then reached for one of his weapons, I'm glad he's dead, quite frankly, if the police are telling us the truth. And I have no reason to believe they're not telling us the truth. No problem with that shooting. Now, it's scary, and thank God there wasn't more carnage that happened there, because that's a very dangerous situation. Thank God. But I don't have a problem with that shooting. Now, there was a lot of speculation and misinformation when everything came out that it was a federal agent, that another cop was shot. Not the case. That's not what happened. But then we go to another shooting, and any shooting is serious, but this one is far more serious and troubling, and it really makes Vegas look bad, and it puts us on the national map in a way that Vegas does not want to be on a national map. From what police are saying, reports are saying, there were several police officers that were arresting a protester. And in the middle of that arrest, or the attempt of incarcerating that individual and putting handcuffs on him, again, these are just reports. I don't know if this was a protester, but allegedly a protester snuck up behind one of the male cops, shot him in the head, and now what we are learning in the latest information on that police officer is that it is not looking good.
Brian,
for
you
him.
cannot call that person a protester.
Okay,
that is an embarrassment to all protesters.
Okay, so I'm not.
You have to call, and I'm you, Reno, LVRJ, whatever. They have to call this person a looter or a rioter.
Okay,
you cannot call
know.
someone who shoots a police officer in the back of the head while they're in a fight with somebody else a protester.
Okay, so
Period.
I'm just trying to give the listeners background on what took place yesterday. I'm not injecting any opinions into this. We will do that, but I'm trying to give people background on what happened. And there are reports that say he was a protester. I'm not saying he was a protester. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm just saying what some of the reports are saying. I don't know. Here's what I do know, and here's what gets me angry. Whether that person was a protester, Black Lives Matter, or a white supremacist, what matters is that police officer probably, and I hope I'm wrong on this one, will never talk again and will never be able to speak with. I hope I'm wrong when I say that, but the reports are that he is in a very grave situation right now,
life support,
which is horrible. And when you talk about a head injury and somebody shot in the head, there certainly never will be the same person they once were. And I'm praying that he's able to make some sort of recovery.
Shot from behind while he was
while
he was engaged with somebody else. I mean, what kind of a worthless coward does something like that?
Well, yeah, that's my point. And what I'm saying is whether it was a protester or a rioter or a white supremacist or a Black Lives Matter whatever the case may be, that will come in due time. What is important is that we have a police officer that is fighting for his life right now, a family that is grieving, and thank God the good police work, they were able to capture this son of a bitch, and that person is behind bars, will hopefully never be released from jail for the rest of his life. But it's horrible on a lot of different fronts. And by the way, this is the first officer, as far as I know, that was shot, although I'm hearing reports in Atlanta where 4 officers were shot upon as well. But this was
that was in St. Louis.
I apologize, St.
There
Louis.
were 2 police officers that I saw on video ran over in New York, a couple more in Buffalo.
He's in stable condition.
There have been, I've probably seen 10 to 12 officers brutally attacked on video in the last 24 hours in the riots.
But I guess the point I'm trying to make is this is the first case where an officer could lose his life.
The point I'm trying to make is Blue Lives Matter.
That officer that was run over, he's in stable but serious condition last I checked. Those officers that were shot at, some were hit. They're in stable condition, thank God. But this is huge news, and it's sad news, and we hope that this officer It doesn't look good. It doesn't look good. When
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
shot in the head, chances are you're probably not going to make it, and I hope I'm wrong on that, but it's a terrible situation. So I want to play you a clip from Sheriff Joe Lombardo. So Sheriff Joe Lombardo woke up earlier this morning, and he held a very brief press conference. This is a part of what Joe Lombardo said earlier this morning on the Strip.
This is a sad night for LVMPD family and a tragic night for our community. With these protests, which are leading to riots, one tragedy is only leading to another. I'm sure you have a lot of questions, as do I. Our investigations into both these incidents will be ongoing throughout the morning, and there's a lot of unanswered questions. What has occurred is utterly unacceptable. I hope the community sees it that way too.
I think the community does see it that way. Any reasonable person would see it that way. You know, I remember when I was a reporter, I had to cover. Was this when I was a reporter? No, I was a talk show host. This was maybe 7-8 years ago, where two police officers were hanging out in a pizza parlor, just having pizza on duty. Two good cops on duty, not doing anything wrong, not bothering anybody. And these two white supremacists a couple ransack the officers, shoot one of the officers in the back of the head, and then the other officer had about 2 seconds to react, gets his gun out, not in time. They kill him too. And those two white supremacists then walk into a Walmart 100 feet away where another person dies, and then eventually police kill both of them. They draped Confederate flags over the dead police officers' bodies, and then they went into Walmart. And when I heard about this case of, somebody going right behind a coward, going right behind a cop and shooting him behind his head, the first thing I thought about was this story. I remember I spoke to the wife of one of the deceased officers a few weeks later, and there haven't been a lot of moments in my life where I got extremely emotional in interviewing somebody or covering a story. It's happened a few times in my career. What I recall, it happened in the case of the Narvaez case, where she was a dancer at the Luxor, and her boyfriend at the time murdered her, cut her up, and murdered her. When I had to cover that story, that was very difficult because I became very close with her sister. It was a very emotional story to cover and a very difficult story to cover. But I remember when I was interviewing one of those officers who'd fallen in Vegas, when I interviewed one of their wives, that was an extremely difficult thing to do. You could hear the pain in her voice. The man loved his job. He loved what he did. And I'm sure we're going to learn a lot about this Metro police officer as well. And I'm getting into debates yesterday on social media, as I always do, where people are tweeting out, all cops are bad, all cops are pigs, all cops are murderers. And again, I'm going to say this again, these are some of the dumbest people in society. If you think that every cop is a bad cop, and you think that every cop is a murderer, then you're not even smart enough to have a conversation with any reasonable person. You're that stupid. Now, I don't think that the majority of these,
and you're also stupid enough to loot and riot.
But let's be honest.
Use
though.
a man's death as the rationale as to why, even though he was the person that killed him, was charged 4 days ago. There is a direct correlation, Brian, between intelligence quotient or IQ and earning power in capitalist America.
Well, I'm not going to talk about capitalist America. Again, I'm trying very, very difficult not to make this political. And what I am doing is I'm speaking logic. I'm speaking about my life experiences, the police officers that I've talked to, that I know. And all I'm trying to say, this has nothing to do with Republican and Democrat. I'm just simply saying that there are a small minority of people out there that think in these protests, it's not a majority, small amount of people that think all cops are bad. I think if you asked every single one of these protesters throughout the country, do you think all police officers are bad cops? The majority of them would say no. I'd like to think that there are more reasonable people than unreasonable people in these protests. Are there bad cops out there? Absolutely. And the example is Minneapolis. Absolutely. But the idea that all these police officers are bad cops and all these police officers don't care about your life and don't think Black Lives Matter, not only is it not true, but it's dangerous to have that way of thinking, and you're wrong and you're stupid if you think that way. Is there racial injustices throughout the country as a whole? Are minorities treated differently than others? Sadly, I would say, yeah, you're probably right, yes. But that doesn't mean that Every cop is a bad cop. We've seen, you don't hear a lot about the good stories throughout the country, and I'll name you a few of them. There have been many police officers, not just in Las Vegas, but throughout the country, that have marched with the protesters. There have been many police officers that have taken a knee in solidarity. There have been a lot of hugs and a lot of handshakes, and I know it's genuine. A lot of these police officers are very angry and upset at the injustice that took place in Minneapolis. There's no question about that. It's not fake emotion.
The crazy part about the thing in Minneapolis is that knee-to-neck restraint was actually allowed by the Minneapolis Police Department.
Not if they're handcuffed and not if they're restrained.
No, 100%.
Where did you see that?
Yes.
I read something differently.
USA Today 3 days ago, that they're the only police department in the country that allows that particular method of restraint. So I would argue that the only city that should be dealing with this right now is Minneapolis.
Right.
If this is all about George Floyd, then why are these riots and this looting all over the country?
Okay, are you talking about riots and looting, or are you talking about protests?
Which one? I'm fine with the protests. I do think that
you do know why the protests throughout the country are happening, right?
I get that, Brian, but that does not explain breaking into businesses, vandalizing property, and destroying things. Your answer's not going to work because there's no justification
what do you mean
for
my
it.
answer's not going to work? You don't even know what I'm going to say. Just listen for a second.
Right. What I'm saying is they're the only police department that actually allows that particular restraint. If this is all about George Floyd, well, then everything should be isolated and all the blame should be on Minneapolis. Like, for example, Carmel, Indiana, they just sued the Minneapolis Police Department for damages accrued in their city because of the actions of the police department.
Okay, so let's
and
be
part
very
of that
clear.
is because they're the only police department that allows that knee-to-neck restraint that killed George Floyd.
Let's start there. Here's what I read about that. What I read is you are allowed to put somebody in restraints, and you're allowed to put the knee to somebody's neck. That is what I read. My understanding is once that person is already not a threat, once that person is restrained, once that person, for example, is handcuffed, you are not allowed to put your knee in somebody's neck. That's what I read. So I read something different.
And did you read the TMZ article yesterday that came out?
Yes, I did.
Where he was on fentanyl?
Yeah, I don't even want to go there.
No, just listen.
I didn't finish my response.
He had methamphetamine in his system.
We can talk about that, but I don't really care
what they're saying. What they're saying about the Hennepin County Medical Examiner is that he had a heart attack while he was being restrained and subdued.
There was another autopsy by the Floyd family that said the exact opposite. And by the way, hold on, Michael Baden is a guy that has been doing this for decades and decades. Michael Baden said something completely different than what you're talking about, but I don't want to go there right now because I wanted to finish my statement. This is very important. The majority of the protesters throughout the country are not ruining businesses and are not causing problems. There are bad actors out there, and yes, I hope those people go to jail. They're horrible human beings, and they're scum. It is very important that when we talk about these Black Lives Matter protests and when we talk about these protests throughout the country, we understand that the majority of these people are good people that want change. The majority of these people are not causing problems. The majority of these people do not have signs up that say F the police. The majority of these people are decent people that are fed up and tired of it. And what I wish, and I didn't want to make this political, but what I wish is that the president would address that issue just as much as some of the other issues that we're facing today. He didn't do it enough. No, he did not. No, he did not.
Brian,
what did he say?
He mentioned specifically the George Floyd situation.
Yeah, but what did he say about systemic racism?
In depth a few days ago.
What did he say about systemic racism?
Is this about George Floyd, or is this about systemic racism and oppression for 1,000 years in capitalist America, where you are not?
Why do you keep saying that?
Because in capitalist America, if you work hard, as hard as you want to work, that's as successful as you can be.
It's easy for you to say as a white person.
No, it isn't.
It's easy for you to make that statement.
Actually, it isn't, Brian.
Well, you have no idea what African Americans go through.
It is not easy for me to say as a white person.
So you don't think African Americans are dealt with differently when it comes to business and everything in this country? You think they're treated the same as you, and it's just hard work for you? Is that what you're saying? Because it's wrong.
I'm saying that if you would like to be successful in America, you can be successful in America.
Easy for you to say, listen, I am not going to say something like, okay, well, I'm not going to take your approach. You know why? Because I don't know what it's like to be black in America. I don't know what it's like to be walking down the street and be afraid of police officers.
So are you saying that every single African American is a victim?
Okay, well,
because of those circumstances.
Once again, if you just listen,
is that what you're doing?
Once again,
because that's what I think you're doing right now.
Would you like me to answer? You interrupted me.
I feel like
again?
that is a disservice to a lot of African Americans out there.
I think you're doing a service.
I'm
to
not.
African
I'm not at
Americans,
all.
and here's why.
I am not at all.
Well, let me explain.
I'm saying we're in the greatest country in the world as far as if you want to make something of yourself in the United States, you are ready. You are willing and able to do so. And if you don't want to, you can still get assistance from the government to live your life.
If I can talk for 30 seconds without you interrupting, because I haven't been able to finish one thought yet. What I'm trying to say is this: minorities as a whole. By law enforcement, business, if you look at the average salary of an African American to a white person, it is different. There is a reason for that. And in my personal opinion, and I think many would agree with me, it has nothing to do with hard work. It has to do with there is systemic racism in this country. And people on the right, particularly white people on the right, want to diminish what African Americans, if I could finish, want to diminish what African Americans are doing in these protests. And it's not just about George Floyd. George Floyd is a symbol now for injustice when it comes to law enforcement. This is something that minorities have had to deal with for hundreds of years. Now, as a white person, if you just want to go on the radio and say, well, it's about capitalism, just work hard and you'll get what you want, that is a ridiculous statement, and it is offensive to African Americans, because I can tell you right now, there is a reason why African Americans are not treated the same as a whole in this country.
Can you not become whatever you want to be in the United States if you have if you're
you don't agree with what I just said?
No. I mean, can you not in the United States? If whatever you want to be in the United States, can you not pursue that dream?
I believe it is more
You
difficult.
absolutely can pursue that dream.
Are you asking me a question, or are you just going to talk over my answer?
You are turning African Americans into victims as a collective by making statements like that, Brian.
Well, guess what?
And you know what's actually making the protests look bad? It's not Donald Trump. It's not the right. It's the looting and the rioting that is resulting of them.
Okay.
That is what's making the protests look bad, Brian.
So it's your
it's
take,
not the protests themselves are not making them look
themselves look bad. That African Americans
that's totally fine.
So it's your take that
I'm not going to turn African Americans into a collective victim in the United States of America.
Because you don't know what it's like to be black. So I'm not surprised you have that approach.
I shouldn't have to know what it's like to be black.
No, you don't.
To not turn the entire race into victims in the United States, Brian.
You are diminishing.
No, you are. You are diminishing African Americans' opportunity in the United States.
Okay,
period.
Can I talk? What you're saying is so beyond ridiculous. I don't even know where to start. You are saying that you believe African Americans as a whole are treated the same as if you are white in this country. That is one of the dumbest things you've ever said on this show. It's not factually accurate, and I couldn't find one African American that I've ever talked to in my life that would agree with you. You are white. I am white. I don't know what it's like to be black. You don't know what it's like to be black. And the reason why many of these protesters are out there are not just because of George Floyd. They want to be treated as equals. Hold on a second. I'm not done yet. It is easy for you to say that, sitting in that chair, grown up as a white person, growing up in Omaha. It is easy for me to say that, but I wouldn't say it. Growing up as a white person in Connecticut, the bottom line is this. It's not just about law enforcement. It's not just about the way minorities are treated by law enforcement. That is certainly a big part of this. But they are sick and tired of being racially profiled, and they are sick and tired of not being treated as equals. Now, if you want to look at me for making that statement, and you want to say, oh, you're diminishing African Americans, you're making them seem as victims, that is what these protests are about. They want to be treated as equal. And for you to sit there and diminish that and to say, oh, if you work hard in this country, you can get whatever the hell you want.
Don't get pious.
I'm not getting pious.
You are getting
speaking
pious.
the truth.
You're getting pious, and you are turning African Americans into victims. You are absolutely doing that, Brian.
I think you are. You're acting like a white privileged kid growing up in Omaha.
A white privileged kid growing up in Omaha.
If you want to call me pious, that's what I think.
No, you are being completely pious.
Well, you're acting like what?
I'm not acting white privileged at all.
All right. Well, that's what I think you're doing.
Under no circumstances.
Name call, that's what you're doing. You don't know what it's like to be black.
I did not name call.
You don't know what it's like to be growing up in a black neighborhood, growing up as a minority in this country, and your statement's wrong.
Based on your behavior,
and it's wrong.
You are acting pious.
Based on my behavior.
I am not calling you a buffoon or an idiot or a moron.
Okay. Well, you did that yourself yesterday on the show, so. Because you lost a bet.
Actually, you lost the bet because gaming is sports betting.
Right.
But I let you win the bet because of that.
Right.
Absolutely.
Because you're right. The casinos are open.